Boatworks Today is a viewer-supported show. To learn more on how you can get involved and watch extended ad-free versions of these videos, please visit our website, boatworkstoday.com, and click on the top of the heading where it says Support This Show. Thank you. What is going on, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. My name is Andy with Boatworks Today, and before we get started, let's just do a quick little recap because it's been a little while since, well, yeah. So where we left off last time was we got all the new plywood cut and installed. Now, before we can move on to laying any glass, we have to come in and fill all these little gaps that are around the perimeter of this plywood. So primarily around this bottom lip as well as on the sides. And to do this, I'm going to be using West System epoxy thickened with their 406 filler. And I'm piping it in with a Ziploc bag that has a corner cut off. And it seems to work pretty well. So we're going to get this these cavities filled in, let that cure, and then we get to move on to everybody's favorite part. Yeah, not so much, but part of the process. So the main goal here is, at least along his bottom edge, to create a taper from the bottom of the transom so that it tapers down to be flush with the face of the plywood, so I can lay the glass without having any kind of a gap underneath there. And unfortunately, my battery died, and I wasn't able to get any of the sanding along the sides, but you can see that here. For the glass work on here, all of the layers that I'm going to be putting down are going to be 1708, and I'm going to be laying this down using vinyl ester resin. Now, I could have easily have used polyester resin. That's perfectly fine. Or I could have also used epoxy, but there's tried to find a little bit of a balance between cost and working characteristics. You know, one of the unique things about vinyl ester resin is it's somewhat of a hybrid between a polyester resin and epoxy. So, for example, vinyl ester resin is still a styrene-based resin, much like polyester resin. The thing that makes it a little bit different is that it has epoxy solids mixed in. So it has the working characteristics of, say, like a polyester resin, but it also has a lot of the adhesion and strength and shock absorption factors of epoxy. So it's kind of a nice little mix between the two. Now, the one major downside of vinyl ester resin is that it has a very, very short shelf life. So basically, from the day that it's manufactured, you have 3 months to use it all up, because after that, it's just going right to the dumpster. If you are about to get started on your first fiberglass project, I do have a guide available for download on my website that covers kind of the ins and the outs of each of the types of resins and which one might actually be best for your application. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and check it out. I'll have a link down below in the description. One of the more common questions I get from people that are more new to working with fiberglass is, well, how in the heck do you lay up the glass on either like a vertical surface or when you're trying to work overhead? I mean, without having the whole works come flop down on top of you. And while this is not an overhead situation, the concept and the approach is still the same. So basically, you wet out the surface, and that creates a little bit of somewhat of like a glue layer for the dry glass. And then you can lay the glass in. And then as you're holding it, wet out that area. Once the glass is wetted out, it will stay put. Now, I'm not saying it's real easy at times. I mean, obviously, the larger the pieces, the more tricky it may be. But that's basically how you do it. Now, there is another way to do this, which if you're working with large areas, it's really kind of what I would recommend doing. And that is to use, I believe it's made by 3M, but it's their Super 77. It's their spray adhesive. I did recently set up an Amazon store just to make some of these products easy to find, kind of like a one-stop shop kind of a place. So I will include a link for that down in the description below to the Amazon store, and I'll have that listed up there so you know what I'm talking about. But basically, the way that you use it is you spray a light coat of this adhesive on a clean, bare, dry surface, and let that tuck up for a few minutes, and then you can come in with your glass and then basically stick it in place. Now, the adhesive will hold the glass and until you're able to come back and follow up by wetting it out with the resin. Now, one thing to keep in mind is this is only to be used for the very first layer of glass. Once you've already got, you know, some layers built up, then you can kind of use the resin that's already there as your adhesive for the following layers. So this is kind of a little hack to get the first layer set up, and it does not affect the adhesive qualities or anything of the resin. I mean, basically this adhesive just dissolves into the resin and just becomes part of it. So it's just kind of a nice little trick to use for at least getting that first layer in place. So here's a good example of what I was just talking about, and I'll slow this video down here so it's a little bit easier to see. But this is, I want to say it's my third or fourth layer of glass that I put on here, and the surface is wet. So since the surface is wet, basically anything that you put over top, as long as you kind of are careful about it, it will hold. The previous layers of the resin in the glass will hold the new layers in place, you know, until you're able to come back over with the roller and wet everything out. Once you get to this point where you're actually spreading new resin into the glass, you've got it, you know, licked. I mean, it's not going to go anywhere. And if you're working on very, very large areas, it might make a lot more sense to, rather than, say, working with a sheet that's, say, 3 or 4 feet wide and 7 or 8 feet long, break it down into a more manageable size. So into like 4x4 areas, or, you know, 3x6, or, you know, whatever it is that you're, depending on the situation, whatever size it is that you're able to actually manage. It's always nice to be able to do one large sheet, you know, from top to bottom or front to back, but reality is that that's not always possible. Sometimes you need to break it up and then overlap those seams into more manageable pieces that you can actually, you know, handle. I've never quite been able to figure out what it is that I like about this, but I've always liked going over the fresh glass with a fin roller. I mean, every pass that I make here, you can see that the air, where the air is getting pushed out, it makes the surface look so much more solid, I guess. I don't know. I know I'm weird, but hey, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot to get me excited. And, you know, that sounded a lot better in my head. Awkward. Okay, moving on. When I was cutting the glass for this transom, I intentionally cut it oversized, and I did that for 2 reasons. The main one being is that typically whenever you're handling fiberglass, whether it's 1708, chop strand, or some type of a woven cloth of some sort, a lot of times when you're handling it, it distorts. It stretches and kind of pulls, and just kind of comes out of shape. So 9 times out of 10, it usually doesn't make sense to try and cut the glass to the exact size that you need. It's usually a recipe for disaster. So that was one of the main reasons I cut it oversized. And then also, because it is oversized, I knew I was going to be able to come back, you know, and trim off any excess like I'm doing here. So this way, I was by oversizing it, I knew that each sheet was going to cover all of the area that I needed it to cover, and then, you know, I didn't have to worry about that part. And then as far as trimming all the excess, you can either just cut it or just take a sander and sand it off. And before I can start wrapping the top and the sides with glass, I need to make sure that everything is smooth and has a good contour so that the glass will actually lay flat. So at least right here on this top edge, I mixed up some thickened epoxy. I think I'm using 406. And I'm just basically troweling it in just so that I can, when I sand this off, it'll have a nice, smooth, even surface all the way, you know, from port to starboard side. As well as the front and aft edges. I'll be able to kind of give those a slight radius so that the glass will be able to come up, over, and then back down without having any air trapped underneath it. Same thing, it's going to be the same approach along these the sides as well. I'll go ahead and I'll spare you the boredom of all the, you know, the sanding and shaping and all that. It's actually boring to watch, but it's pretty simple. It's basically you lay up some thickened epoxy, let it cure, come back in, shape it. There's always going to have to be some touch-ups, so you come in, lay up some more epoxy, sand it, lay up some more. I think you get the idea. So, anyways, right now I've finally gotten it to where I'm happy with it, and so I'm giving it a final wipe down, and then we're going to start actually wrapping the glass over the top and the edges, so that this is going to be tying in the new in with the old. And for doing that, again, I'm going to be using the 1708 and vinyl ester resin. Something of interest that I want to point out here is that when I'm laying up this glass, I'd like you to pay attention as far as the order in which this glass is going to be put down. So up to this point, all the glass I've laid up has just been on the main face of the transom. So now that I'm trying to tie this in with the surrounding area, I'm going to start with laying some glass over the top. And for right now, this first initial layer is going to extend down, I believe it's about 3 inches on both the front and the back edge or face of this transom. So I'm going to start with getting this top piece laid in, and then I'm going to lay in the port side and then the starboard side. And it doesn't matter what side you do first, if it's the port or the starboard, but the point I'm trying to make here is that I'm overlapping each layer from the top and the sides. And as I add more pieces, each new section is basically being extended out another roughly 2 inches on each edge. So as I'm going, the pieces are getting larger and larger and larger. And this is going to do a couple things. For one, because they're getting larger and larger, it's going to make it a little bit easier to feather in this edge come time when we actually start fairing all of this in. And also, because each piece is getting larger and larger, that's also what that means, is that each piece is having direct contact with the surrounding area. So that seems to be kind of a common question that I get all the time is, when you're building up an area, should you start with the largest piece first or the smallest piece? And 9 times out of 10, what I always recommend is start with the smallest piece and then work your way up in size, just for that very reason, so that each layer that you're laying down is in direct contact with the surrounding area. Now, there are, in some situations, exceptions to that, but if you think about it, if you start with the largest piece first and then build up from there, if that first piece, for whatever reason, delaminates, everything on top of that is coming off with it. So, at least to me, starting small and working up, it just seems to be what makes sense, and I've never, ever, ever had an issue. All right, so here's what happens when you try to do too many things at once. The roller that I was using, the resin started to kick, so the roller was no longer working, and the first layer of glass that I had laid up was already starting to set up, and that was making the other layers that I put on top of that set up even faster, and I wasn't able to get all the air bubbles rolled out and smoothed out before everything just got, beyond being able to work with it. So if you look real closely, I mean, they're small, and this is still a lot better than most production type boats, but it's either right or it's wrong. But so I've got some air bubbles in here. I got a hard edge here, so there's no way glass is going to wrap around that. And same thing happened over in this corner. So I've got a little bit of air bubble stuff going on in here, and again, another hard edge. It's just pooched. So I've got to seal this up so I can sand it. And if I don't seal it, then I'm going to end up going through a box of sandpaper to sand like 2 square feet. So it doesn't make sense to do that. So I guess I'm going to have to kind of switch gears a little bit, seal this off with some gel coat and some PVA, and then tomorrow's another day. So with that little hiccup behind me, now it's time to do one final step and really, really tie all of these little bits and pieces together. And that's going to be laying a few more large sections over the main body of this transom. Now what that's doing is that's overlapping the tabbing that went along the sides as well as the top. So in total, when this is all said and done, I'm going to have, I think I had 9 layers of glass, 9 layers of 1708 over the main, face of this transom. And then plus the 3 layers that went over the top, as well as the tabbing along the side. So in total, this should be a little over 1/4 inch thick of a pretty lean laminate. I went through and I used the fin roller on each step. So there certainly isn't an excess amount of resin in here. It's a pretty lean laminate, which is exactly what you're looking for. And after giving this glass a couple hours to set up, we're going to follow up with a nice heavy layer of gel coat and then some PVA so that everything fully cures, and then we're going to be ready to go on to the next step. But unfortunately, that's going to have to wait until next weekend because, well, this video is just starting to get a little bit too long. All right, so bear with me here. I did not want to leave you with a cliffhanger, and I initially kind of wanted to be able to finish this project off completely in this video, but over the last few projects that I've done, I've made some changes in the materials that I use for fairing. And because of that, I guess I wanted to have a little bit of extra time to kind of get into what it is that I'm really kind of starting to love, and kind of go over some of the reasons why. So, and just for that reason, I wanted to kind of give that its own little video. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up and share it, social stuff, however that happens. And if you have any questions, comments, as always, please leave those down below. And yeah, until next time, thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. Ow.
This has been a Boatworks Today production.